Let's talk a little more college football before we get into the heart of the season. What's going on, good people? Good morning. It is a very interesting Tuesday for the entire NFL, and the Seattle Seahawks are no exception. Today is the day by which every NFL team needs to get down to a 53-man roster. And some teams have already done it, but a lot of teams haven't. The Seahawks are one of the teams that have not. So they have, as of the upload of this video, about 4 hours to get down to 53. And I will definitely be discussing it as that situation develops. Remember, just because we get down to a 53-man roster doesn't mean it's over, because every other team is doing it, which means there are going to be a bunch of players out there that are potentially interesting to your team, even if they didn't make the team they were originally on. So maybe the Seahawks get down to 53, but they see some players out there on waiver wire that they like more than the players that a player or two that they kept. So then they have to try to go get that player. And if they get the player, they got to release another player to make room. And it could go on for a little while. And then you have the practice squad. So by no means is everything over at 1, but 1 is the deadline for things to actually settle into a place where the roster is legal. As stuff happens today, I will be making videos about it. I'll be making a Bleacher Report video as well once we get the final cuts. So keep an eye out for that. But as of right now, as of me recording this video, nothing has happened yet. By the time you watch this video, stuff may already be happening. That's possible. But since nothing has happened yet from my perspective, recording this video, I'm going to go ahead and talk about a little bit more college football stuff because, again, I know that this stuff is only for a certain audience. There are a lot of people that aren't really into this stuff, this draft prospect evaluation, well ahead of time stuff. And I understand that the Seahawks stuff, the stuff that actually pertains to what the Seahawks do with roster moves and who they have on their team, who they might trade, who they might not trade, that's more pertinent to everybody's interest. So I understand that this is only for a relatively small subsection of my audience, but I'm going to go ahead and knock this out of the way now because I know that some people like it and may as well, because once the cuts start flying, that's all anybody's going to want to think about. So we're going to get this out of the way. College football. Technically, the season started a few days ago. There were 5 games on Saturday, but I didn't really feel the need to make a video about or before those games. There wasn't a lot going on. That's not to say there weren't good games. I mean, Iowa State versus Kansas State that's a good early season game. That's 2 ranked teams, 2 teams that have aspirations for good things in 2025. And obviously, people are able to get entertainment out of any game in college football for the most part. So I'm not really talking about that. I'm talking about prospects. I'm talking about college prospects. To my knowledge, to the best of my knowledge, there wasn't really an upper level or even necessarily mid-level prospect playing in any of these 5 games. I didn't see anything that I really cared about in these 5 games. So I was like, okay, we'll let, some people call this week 0. We'll let week 0 go by, and then I'll make the video next week before week 1, because week 1 is when things start to get interesting. So a couple days from week 1, let's take a look at my latest creation here. This monstrosity, it's actually not that big, but this chart is basically an overview of what I believe to be the most interesting college football prospects in college football this year. These are the guys who either will or can declare for the draft next year. Not all of these guys will, we know that, especially with NIL money. A lot of these guys are going to stay back. A lot of these guys are going to read the tea leaves and decide, hey, maybe I'd rather just stay in college for a year. Maybe I'd rather stay in college for 2 years in some cases. Maybe they don't have a great season. But this is a list of players that are currently thought highly of by general draft gurus for the 2026 draft that are eligible to be in the draft. And what I've done is I've sorted by school. And I've assembled a list of each schools, all of these schools. It's 32 schools in total. All the players they have that I think are of an elevated level of interest for the 2026 draft. And obviously there are going to be a lot of names that are not here that will ultimately be there by midway through the season or the end of the season. We'll add stuff as time goes by. There are definitely going to be players that announce themselves to the world in a big way during the season. But as of right now, I think this is a good starting point. This is a good list of players. It's a little over 100 total players, I believe. And it at least gives us an initial launch point for evaluating the 2026 NFL draft. Let's go over how I did this, just so you guys can get an idea of how I like to sort things out. You have a list of players for the school and the position they play. And then you have a point system. And I want to be clear, this is subjective, but basically I ranked, well, no, I didn't rank. I rated players from 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest, in terms of the interest level I believe the Seahawks should have in drafting that player. And there are a few different aspects that go into it, right? Like a 1 is a player that is on the list, but I'm not really all that intrigued. There's not really a lot going on there for me beyond the fact that they're a good prospect. But as you start to check certain boxes, like you get extra points if you are an upper level prospect, like somebody that's projected to be a first round pick right now. If you're playing a position that is likely to be of need for the Seahawks next year. If you are not so good of a prospect that it's pretty unthinkable the Seahawks will be in a position to draft you. Those are things that will get you more points. And again, 5 is the maximum. So any player listed here that I put a 5 next to, that's a player that I think checks all the boxes on being somebody that we need to make ourselves aware of. Like, just as an example, Parker Brailsford is my first 5 here for Alabama. The reason why he's a 5, plays center, which is a position I think the Seahawks are going to need to seriously address. Draftable. I don't think Brailsford is likely to be a first-round pick anyway. Wherever he goes, he's not going to be so high that he's out of range for the Seahawks. At least I don't think so. And also, as far as center prospects go, he's very, very appealing. He's not generational for the position, but he is very, very strong. And then you have a guy like Arch Manning. Now, Arch Manning, phenomenal prospect, plays a position that I think could be of need. It depends on how this season goes. It depends on how we perceive things at the end of the year. But there's no way if he declares the Seahawks are going to have a chance to draft him. This is a guy who's basically already guaranteed to be a top 3 pick. I don't believe the Seahawks can get a top 3 pick. It would require such a catastrophe that I don't think it's worth spending that much time on. Same with a guy like Cade Klubnik for the same reasons. Great prospect. Might be a player of interest in terms of positional need depending on how this season goes in play. But you're not going to be able to get Klubnik with your first round pick unless either he has a very disappointing season or your team is much worse than anybody can currently conceive of. So different things go into that calculation. Of course, the calculation is subjective, but no matter what I did, it would be subjective. There's no way to be objective about something like this. I mean, there are a lot of people that would argue that quarterback is not any kind of position of need for the Seahawks. There are people out there who would argue that a position like left tackle should be of dire need for the Seahawks because we should trade Charles Cross after this season. There are going to be people who think that defensive tackle is a position of need because you should always be adding more defensive tackles, right? It's hard to agree on stuff like this, so I just went with my general feelings. So looking at all the data I have here, Alabama is clearly the most interesting team to me this year. They've got 3 really good offensive line prospects, 2 of which are very intriguing to me, Brailsford and Jaden Roberts. They've got probably, maybe, I don't want to say the most, but okay, I'll say one of the most interesting edge prospects to me. They've got a legitimate nose tackle. They've got a really good wide receiver, former Husky, by the way. And they've got 9 total players that I've currently penciled in to be on my watch list. I gave them, that's 31 points, by far the most. And then you had Clemson. Clemson was in second place with 23 points. Klubnik, Antonio Williams, who's one of my favorite early receivers this year. TJ Parker could be a really intriguing big edge. The edge room is going to be potentially completely flipped over this offseason. And a couple other interesting prospects adds up to a 23. You can't get away from Klubnik, no matter how much you may not need a quarterback, and no matter how much you may not be able to draft him. He's just really, really intriguing. Texas is also strong this year. 22 points for Texas for me. Mostly powered by DJ Campbell, who's probably the best right guard prospect. They've also got a nice little running back. Arch Manning is fascinating, even if you're not going to be able to draft him. Penn State was tied with Texas. I had them at 22 as well. Really like Denise Sutton. Really like their 2 running backs. Drew Alars, very compelling as well. Texas A&M, I had 17 points. Mostly powered by Kevin Concepcion and Cassius Howell. 2 guys that I think are very much worth watching. Oregon, Mekhi Hughes, their running back. That might be just in the wheelhouse, and I think the Seahawks are likely to need a running back next year. Auburn was next up, mostly on the strength of Eric Singleton Jr. at receiver, but Connor Lew, another center prospect that should be a top 100 guy. Kendrick Falk as well, could be a versatile swing defensive lineman. You know, a guy who can play inside or outside. Kind of a unique player, could be somebody that's fun for McDonald. Then you had Ohio State with 14 points, Carnell Tate leading the way there. LSU, handful of somewhat interesting players, nobody over the top, but Nussmeier, Patrick Payton, Harold Perkins, these guys are compelling. Indiana has a quarterback that I really have my eye on. I want to figure out what's up with Fernando Mendoza. They've also got an edge and a receiver that I like. Not too much beyond that, but Indiana's looking pretty strong. And then you kind of get down to that next tier, got teams that are just not quite so compelling. Florida, Jake Slaughter leads the way there. He's very intriguing as a center that you can probably get in day 2. 12 points there. Same for South Carolina. Nick Harbor and Lenora Sellers carry. Jalen Kilgore can't be forgotten about. Really like that trio from South Carolina. Georgia, Zachariah Branch carries the way here, but there's a few players on Georgia this year. USC has a couple receivers. I really think this team may need a receiver next year in the draft, and those are 2 guys that are likely to be top 100 picks as of right now. Notre Dame, they've got a running back, a couple offensive linemen that are decent, 9 points. Iowa, they've got a couple linemen and an edge rusher. Arizona, they've got, it's mostly just, actually for Arizona State and Washington, it's very similar. They have a really, really interesting wide receiver. Arizona State has Tyson. Washington has Boston. Then they have a fairly interesting cornerback, Keith Abney II and Takario Davis. Miami, really, really good pair of prospects here. Maui Goa at right tackle. If Abe Lucas doesn't get that long-term commitment after this season, I think that has to be a very compelling option for the Seahawks. And Ruben Bain, another one of these top-level edge rushers that I don't believe is such a blue chipper. He's guaranteed to be a top 10 pick. Oklahoma, John Mateer leads the way by far. He's a very interesting potential second-round quarterback, and he does the heavy lifting there. You got Utah with 2 tackles. You've got Northwestern with a couple of okay guys. Illinois has an edge rusher and a safety. Cincinnati, 1 player, but it's a really good one with Corleone. Arizona, Sam Leavitt, 4 points. And then you've got a bunch of stragglers here. Vanderbilt has a tight end. Boston College has a left tackle. Ole Miss, Michigan, Tennessee, Colorado, Duke. That's the rundown. Obviously, some of those schools, it's pretty thin. But basically, you can kind of look at this list and figure out what teams should I keep an eye on this week. What games are the most interesting? Like this week, you look at Thursday, a couple days away. What are the teams that are worth keeping an eye on Thursday? The answer is there really isn't a lot. Thursday is not the hot week this week. We do have Duke, right? Duke had a corner that was kind of interesting. Cincinnati has Corleone. But you don't really get to the fun stuff on this list until really Friday, a little bit of Friday. But the fun stuff doesn't really kick in until Saturday, where you get Texas versus Ohio State. That's very big. That's about as fat as it gets. You go a little bit later, and there are plenty of teams here. There are plenty of games here, by the way, that are pretty low level. I understand that. That's the nature of college football. But you get later in the day, you get Georgia playing a relative cupcake. Okay, that's not the greatest in the world, but Alabama, Florida State should be at least passably decent this year. So that's an interesting test for them. That's definitely worth keeping your eye on. Oregon's getting a cupcake, not the best. Excuse me. Same with Oklahoma. John Mateer's not getting a great test in week number 1 here. Florida, very much a cupcake, right? And then you get further and further into the day, you start getting to some stuff that's LSU versus Clemson. That might be the game of the day. That's pretty fat. That one is going to be tough to beat. You've got good prospects on both sides, especially that Clemson team is relatively loaded with guys I'm keeping my eye on this year. I don't know if there's anything too interesting in the late PM hours, but we can usually find at least 1 or 2 players, right? Like, hey, Washington's going to play, and look, Washington has a cupcake week 1, but, it's better than nothing. And then you get to Sunday, Notre Dame versus Miami. That's not too bad. TCU versus North Carolina. That's not so great this year, but you consistently can find stuff if you're looking at college football through this lens. So even if you're not a fan of college football as a sport, you can be a fan of it in terms of scouting out players for your favorite team the following year. All right, that's what I got. Let me know what you guys think. I'll see you guys later. Go Hawks. Like I said, things are going to get messy over the next few hours, and I'll make a video about it. I'll make videos about it. Whatever needs to be covered, I will cover. So keep you posted. See you guys soon. Go Hawks. Let me know what you think, if this sort of thing is compelling to you.